Thank you all for joining. This is the Cheshire Impact webinar series all around the roadmap for Pardot success. Really excited to have you here. Really excited to share this content with you. We're going to be talking about the Cheshire Success Index, the roadmap for marketing automation. Let's get right into it. So much to talk about today. If you haven't met me, I'm very excited to meet you. Feel free to send me an email afterward. I am Casey@CheshireImpact.com. On Twitter, CaseyChesh. Hit me up. Look forward to chatting with you, connecting, hearing feedback on today, as well as talking about marketing automation. 3 quick numbers to introduce me by. 10 is the number of years I've been working with Pardot. It makes me feel old, and that number grows every year, but it's very exciting because that second number, which you've also seen grown if you joined us on other webinars, is the number of Pardot implementations that we've done. Not even projects, that's just implementations. We've worked with a lot of great companies to help them maximize Pardot. And some have done it really well, some haven't done it yet. And so all these learning lessons have come together in today's presentation and all the content we have for you today. So last number, 32, is not my age. I do appreciate it. Nope, that is actually the number of skydives that I've done, and hopefully this Saturday that number will improve. I know a lot of you have been seeing that number stay at 32. Like, what's going on, Casey? Well, that number is going to increase. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I'll report back on our next CSI webinar. I'll let you know if that turns into 33 or 34. Finally, Cheshire Impact, the company that's hosting this today, we'll talk about us later. This is not a pitch session. This is to talk about marketing automation and how to really maximize Pardot. So today's agenda is a lot of fun. We're going to have some fun stories. We're going to have some models and some also really get into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to actually get the most out of Pardot. And we've broken it up into phases. We're going to talk about those. There's an assessment and there's a maturity model that we're going to talk about. It's called the CSI. That's the focus of today's presentation. And if you've been to any of our other sessions, we actually have webinars on each individual element of the CSI. But this is to talk about the CSI as a whole, the maturity model, and really the path and what it takes to actually maximize Pardot. And it's very exciting to see the results. So it's great stuff. Finally, we'll get you on the right path after that. But let's get into it. If you've been on one of these webinars before, you'll know this is the case. I love breaking the fourth wall. Hey, you're all here. I actually said your names earlier. You know, like, you can always say hi in chat. If you have questions, throw them in the chat menu, throw them in the Q&A menu. Wait to the end or don't wait to the end. We will have Q&A at the end, but you know what? The more interactive this is, the less like a webinar this is. I really see webinars going away. Things like podcasts and interactive meetings, that's really where we're going to. So you can sit back and eat your lunch watching this, or you can just go crazy on that chat menu and just start chatting and interacting and that kind of thing. I'm totally fine. Take me off the train of thought. That's totally cool. Let's really get some information over here, right? So very much about reality. We're not going to talk about silver bullet BS. We're going to talk about what it actually takes to really maximize Pardot. Jay, you're listening up. I love it. You're already engaging with me. Perfect. And then finally, we're going to share experiences here. So again, I've had a chance to be a long-term marketer. Those 10 years of working with Pardot, not just all as an agency at Cheshire Impact. No. I've been a long-time marketer using Pardot, using other tools. We're all kind of peers here today. So I like to share those experiences with you over pitching. We will have a slide about Cheshire Impact at the end, but that's just because it has a really cool graphic, not because I'm trying to sell you something. So let's just have a great conversation here. All right, let's do it. The 3 challenges that face marketers and face anyone that's a Pardot user. The challenge is to actually maximizing the system. How many times have we come in and met a new client and you look at the system and guess what? You have this badass marketing automation system and we're using it like MailChimp. What is going on, right? Now, if this is you, don't worry. This is judgment-free zone. Because what we're going to try to do here is identify what are the reasons that we end up not necessarily using marketing automation to its fullest. And guess what? Almost none of them are actually your fault. These are just things that are happening in the ecosystem that kind of get in the way of actually maximizing the tool. Number 1 is activity. How many of you can relate to this guy in the hamster wheel at work, right? And specifically what comes to mind is when I've been that marketing manager at a company and I had to send that monthly campaign out. You have a monthly campaign to get sent across. Go ahead and say, I've been there, or me, or if you had that monthly campaign, raise your hand, or, shoot a smile in there. We've all been there where you have to get that thing out. And in all that work, yep, I see a whole bunch of hands. All that work goes into getting that campaign out, right? All that work. And you almost spend that whole month, and you're thinking about it, prepping the webinar for it, and the email campaigns, and maybe the segmentation, all that work. Kendra, I see you too. Yep, absolutely. All that work goes into it. And then what happens? You execute it, it happens, and then what? Then what? What happens next month? The same thing. And it almost feels like we never actually got any better. We just did more and more of that marketing campaign thing. And one time I experienced this directly from even the leadership, where I was a marketing manager at a company, and I was at lunch eating my sandwich or whatever it was, and the CEO came over, and he something like, "Hey, Casey," because that's what CEOs sound like. He said, "Hey, Casey, how many emails did we send this month?" I actually knew the answer, which is pretty impressive, right? Well, actually about 1 million emails. We sent about 1 million emails this month. And he said, "That's great. Next month, let's send 1.5 million, right?" Again, activity mindset, thinking that marketing was all about just sending out those emails, that monthly engagement. And if the outside forces, or the leadership even, are thinking, well, you're just the activity person, it can be hard not to focus all your time on activity. Well, there's a way to do that and then also build out Pardot so that it can help you keep the activity going, and then you don't have to be on this wheel, right? The only reason to be on this wheel is to get exercise. Otherwise, get off that thing, go hang out in a beanbag. Somebody quoted me on this a long time ago. I don't think it's that great of a quote, but they did. So they put it down. It's called marketing automation, right? If after a year you're not automating, then something's wrong. And let's fix it. And let's face it, sometimes when you're in that campaign mindset and everyone else is expecting you to get those campaigns out, you're not necessarily thinking, how could I automate more of this? But that's why we're here. We're here to talk about that and the different things you should be thinking. The next challenge. Does anyone know about Chief Martech? He's a cool guy. You should follow him on Twitter. I had a chance to interview him on the podcast. Chief Martech, super cool guy. Scott Brinker, amazing. He's been doing this thing for, I don't know how many, almost a decade now, where he goes out there and finds all the different SaaS companies in the marketing landscape. And you can see, if you can squint your eyes, you can dive into content marketing, social advertising, mobile apps. Do you see in the companies you're using in those logos? There's over 5,000. This is the Martech 5,000, right? All the different apps you could buy. Well, it doesn't help that in marketing, we're all about innovating. We're all about trying new things and testing new things. It doesn't help that there's new things all around us, thousands of them, all competing for our interest. In fact, not only is there that, but they're all looking to tell us, here's another technology you should use. Here's something else you should try. And so here we are, activity mode, trying to get those emails out for that CEO. And we know we should be building some automation into Pardot, but we just decided to onboard this new system that does social blah, 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 right? So now we got some attention put over there. Meanwhile, Pardot just stays that email tool, almost like it's a MailChimp. And we don't want to do that. But this happens, and look, it's not your fault. This stuff's out there. Finally, does anyone else out there feel like you're eating an elephant when it comes to building out Pardot? Now look, Pardot's the easiest tool to use. Marketo, Eloqua, all these other tools. Pardot, the UI is fantastic, right? So I'm a huge fan of it. That's why I decided to work with it, brought all these companies onto it, and eventually created Cheshire Impact to work exclusively and help people with Pardot, because I love it. Now the challenge though is there's a lot in there. And I did some funny math here. The phrase, well, how do you eat an elephant, right? Just a bite at a time. I was curious, how many bites are there in an elephant? So we did a little math. Christina helped me out. We kind of put it all together. If you were to eat an elephant a bite at a time, there's about 160,000 bites. Your jaw might hurt, but you would not be hungry. Well, we did the same kind of mathematics, just kind of having fun, to really think about Pardot. And did you know there's actually 83 navigational menus on Pardot? All the drop downs and the drop downs and the drop downs. There's a lot in there. Trailhead has a bunch of resources, all specific to Pardot. And take all that work and then figure you probably have a bunch of different buyers that you have to customize things for. Multiply all that together, it's a gigantic number. It's like you're eating 3 or 4 elephants when you're trying to work on marketing automation. And here's the challenge that happens a lot. And I don't know if anyone can relate to this. Feel free to shoot me a note if you can. You get out of implementation and there's 80,000 things you can do with Pardot. And you're like, this is the best. And then all of a sudden the dread sets in because you realize, oh no, there's like a lot to do. I have so much to do, right? And then there's so much to do that it's like, but wait, what do we do first? There's not really anything there, right? So we're like, okay, where do I focus my time? And then you know what ends up happening? All those other distractions, the other apps, and then the activity mindset kicks in, and we don't actually know what to do first on Pardot, so we just kind of don't do anything, or we kind of just do a little bit. And one other thing that just drives me crazy, and I saw it even today on Twitter. There was a consultant saying, hey, check out the most underused parts of Pardot. And it was driving me crazy. And you don't want to be angry on Twitter, right? Some people do. But it was driving me crazy is that's that mentality that we're trying to avoid here. We're trying to avoid the mentality of, oh, here's an unused feature you should try. It's like, well, hold on. Do you have your ROI set up? First things first, right? So what we realized is what was missing from this whole equation was a roadmap. A roadmap maturity model is cool, but not just here's the 8 things you should do, but more specifically, here's what you should do in order. So that's what we set about to create. And the cool thing is we had this collective experience from over 2,000 at the time. Obviously that number's increased, but looking back and we looked at all the different groups we'd worked with, who did it really well, right? Thinking, oh, okay, wow, knocked it out of the park. Sometimes we've had clients that I learned things from, they actually trick me and I don't even know they're sending a Pardot email and I get it and I'm like, wow, did you send that or was that Pardot? And they're like, it was Pardot. I'm like, great job. I had no idea. So there's those examples and there's other examples where you're stuck in that activity hamster wheel, right? And so all of these different things combined, we looked at it, we said, we figured it out. And so what came of that is a bit of a roadmap, a bit of a pathway. First things first, second things second, that kind of thing. And so what you see here is when NASA was actually trying to go to the moon, which maybe for some of you feels like maximizing Pardot, right? Getting to the moon and back. They had this gigantic checklist. And of course, engineers would have a gigantic checklist, gigantic multi-page directional checklist, see page 14.4, right? All those kind of things. But what really surprised me was they actually spent time going through and creating a graphic to show the exact same thing. And I'm sure the graphical ones, here today can probably appreciate, oh, good. I didn't really want to read 40 pages. I just wanted to kind of see the overview. And they did that. They created this. But what I love about it is it highlights what happens if you don't follow the path when you're doing a moon mission. What happens? You don't come home. You don't get to the moon. Not a mission success, and you might even die, right? Apollo 13, all these things, they were following the checklist and still things went wrong. This is the same kind of thing that can happen with marketing automation. How many times have I had a conversation with someone who was trying to do multi-touch tracking and they didn't have touches to track, right? So you can see how these kind of things can happen to us in the marketing world as well. So with that, we created this thing called the Cheshire Success Index. CSI. I mean, that acronym is just way too good to pass up. So the CSI, it's a couple things. First of all, it's a flight plan, right? It's that same NASA thing. Do this first. Do this feature in Pardot and the strategy in Pardot. There's strategies and there's tactics. They're all combined together and they're fantastic. And so there's 10 steps to it. In every step is a particular feature, a particular thing you should set up in Pardot, something you should address in Pardot first, then second, then third, then fourth, and fifth. And they're in order, which means you want to do 1 before you do 2, and 2 before 3, and so on. So what we did is not only create this, this roadmap, but it's also an assessment. So every step, there's actually a question associated with it. It's kind of like a probing question or a question that starts a discussion, like an open-ended question. And we're going to actually get to examples of several of these today. But what it does is we ask you the question, and we do this, by the way, on an assessment. We call it a CSI call. We get on a call together, and we go through these different steps. And we say, okay, are you doing X? And if it's a yes, you get a point. If it's a no, you put a 0. And if you're kind of doing it, you get a 0.5. The result of this is that at the end of it, you have a score, a number from 0 to 10, telling you exactly how well you're using Pardot. And the cool thing is, a lot of us, you probably can relate to this, have been like, I have a gut feeling I'm not using Pardot as much as I could, but I really would like to. But that gut feeling, you're like, it's kind of vague. But at least now you'll have a number. Maybe it's 2. Maybe it's 6. There's a lot of low numbers, but that's okay because at least you know where you're at. And the cool thing is you also know your very next step because your next step is the lowest number that's still incomplete. And then finally, you're going to know what a 10 looks like. And that's super inspiring, and it's fun to think about, where can we go? Where can we get into this far off region? Here's an example of the assessment, the questions, right? So CSI number 2 is all about setting up source ROI reporting. And we're going to go over all the different steps and all the different things that are featured. But just notice it has this sort of question and answer. And I'll just ask everyone out there, you go ahead and throw it in chat, throw it in the question, the Q&A, however you want to send it. Do you know where your revenue driving leads come from? Is it a yes? Is it a no? Is it a partial? Go ahead and just throw it in chat, throw it in the Q&A interface. Do you know where your revenue driving leads come from? All right, I've got some yeses. You would get a point there. I've got some no's. I've got some partials. Partials would be 0.5s, exactly. So we go through this thing together, and at the end of it, we come out with a number. And the number basically gives you, and no clue, hey, no clue. That'd be a 0 in that one, but that's cool because we can actually work with you to figure that part out. And ROI tracking is number 2, so that gets accomplished very soon. But here's the whole roadmap, right? So if you think about climbing a peak or climbing Mount Everest, you don't just hop onto the top peak, like drop off in a helicopter. You got to go to base camp, and you got to go to the next camp and the next camp. So it's this gradual process, right? So it's all good. For a lot of us, let's just make sure our base camp is set up. Let's make sure phase 1 is set up. All good. So these mountains show the different phases. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through these phases, but I'll just keep talking for a little bit so you can kind of look at it. But every single one of these things is grouped into a phase, and they're in order. So if you can see, phase 1 is about the foundation, segmentation, ROI tracking, data preparedness. We're going to talk about these things, but that's in that first phase. So we want to make sure those are accomplished before we go to the next one, the next one, the next one. And then when you get to phase 4, that's the fun phase, and we're going to get to that. All right, foundation phase. Does anyone know what this is the foundation of? Any guesses what building? And I'll give you a hint. It's related to Salesforce. It's related to Salesforce. But there's no signs in there. Ah, ding, 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 winner. Salesforce Tower in San Fran. How did you know? Good. It's good. It's a good guess. But way to go. Yes, this is the Salesforce Tower. Another one where I keep all the money I give Salesforce. That's it. It's in the basement, in the vault down below. This is the foundation for the Salesforce Tower in San Fran, tallest building in San Francisco. It took them something like 18 days to pour all the concrete into the floor, which actually sounds pretty quick, come to think about it, being such a large space. But it took a lot of time to pour all that concrete and get all that foundation in there. But with a strong foundation, you could send your building way up into the sky and have all sorts of really cool lounges up top, and you can have your helicopter land up there, and you can have all sorts of fun widgets, right? So you got to have a good foundation. So foundation phase. Let's talk about what the different steps are. This isn't exactly a CSI conversation. We're going to have a chance later on to get signed up to be able to go through this together. So when we actually want to get your score, that'll be a process. It's more of a conversation. So yourself, myself, or someone on the team, where we go through and ask you the specific question like you saw at the beginning. We say, okay, here's the question. Do you fit that? Kind of like you all answered, 0.5 or yes or no. We're going to do that for each question. So that happens separately offline from this, but what I want to do is give you an understanding of some of these steps so that not only can you have those CSI conversations and get your score, but also understand the whole process in general and the fact that you got to get that foundation solid and go in order. And what's cool is when you have an order to it, you don't have to sweat the small things. And yes, by the way, will there be a copy of slides? Yeah, we'll do slides. We'll do slides. We'll do recordings. If you want, I'll swing by your office and personally say this out loud to everyone. Whatever. Let's have a good time. So foundation phase. First, Number one CSI element is understanding your buyer and then using that information in segmentation. Why? Because all the email activities, all the other advanced activities, all the other nurturing activities are all going to tie off of this. And what's fascinating is it's number one, but how many times do we kind of give it lip service or maybe not even address it at all? And one of the things that would happen for this particular one is, are you emailing everyone at the same time, or do you have different lists you're emailing to? And then how did you create those lists? Did you create them just based on, well, group A and group B, or one's a partner sale and one's just all of our customers? But how could you better segment those customers? That's what conversations should happen first. Even the idea of buyer personas. Had a chance to interview Adele Ravella, who wrote the book Buyer Persona, and actually learn from her, what are buyer personas versus profiles? And that's the kind of information that goes into this particular step. And then also dynamic segmentation. Are you using static lists in Pardot? Are you using dynamic lists? You want to get those dynamic lists up and running so that you're not constantly doing list maintenance. Let the list maintain itself. Give it the right criteria, let it roll. Second, first touch ROI. That question we asked you earlier. Do you know where your revenue driving leads come from? What's the first touch? This is early on. The reason this is number two is because when you nail this, and it's very straightforward to do this, it doesn't require much work at all to start having this data come in. And when you do this, you start winning some serious street credit in your organization. I went from being an activity marketing shop at a company to being like a revenue marketing investment, right? Instead of being marketing that spends all our money, it was, oh, wow, you spent $5K and you got us all this business that turned into like $400,000 worth of deals. Would you like another 5K? Would you like another 5K? It's like, whoa, okay, got it, right? The whole conversation shifted for me because I got that first touch ROI tracking figured out. And it's really important. There's only a number on there, but don't worry. We actually have webinars on each and every one of these topics. We have worksheets, and there's a bunch of resources. And we're going to talk about resources at the end. But if you're getting excited, and I'm like getting you all like thirsty to do more of these things, good. That's the whole point. But just know the order. You want to make sure you've got number one nailed. Understand who your buyer personas are. Number two, ROI tracking. Number three, data. Data. You could do all this work and all the things that come later, but maybe it doesn't even matter because your data is so messed up that your results aren't even clear and nothing's actually working. And the cost of data is crazy. And you know what's even more bizarre is that there was a stat that was showing that there's so many millions of Americans change jobs every year. So even if your data is good right now, it's actually slowly degrading as we sit here in this webinar, right? It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, my data is good. And then, 8 years ago, or, 8 years from now, it's still good. No, it's constantly getting decayed. So you need to have some processes figured out to not only clean it up once and for all at the beginning, but also have a process to keep it clean. Duplicates. Do you have a duplicate problem? We got to address that before we go any further. It's kind of like that. Stop here, do not proceed any further. Do not collect your $200. Address this situation now. So duplicate addresses happen here. And then finally, structure for reporting. Advanced reporting, B2B marketing analytics, Salesforce Block Tableau. Would you like to use that? Probably. But guess what? Your data needs to be good. Otherwise, you could get the most prettiest reports and the most amazing dashboards that show nothing because your data isn't squared away. A lot of this is like field names and just making sure you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. We've got some cool worksheets around this to show you what you should be looking at and what you should be working for. And by the way, these are also things just to ask if you are working with someone at Cheshire Impact right now. These are things to then ask the person you're working with. Hey, I heard about data preparedness. I'm probably, zero on that. I want to get some work done on that. Where do we start? And they're going to have some stuff for you. Cool. Now it's time for growth phase. Growth phase is where marketers get to be marketers. This is where the fun is at. And this is where the majority of the work is at, but it's the stuff that we want to be doing anyways, right? So we got the foundation poured. We're building our skyscraper. Now we're in the growth phase. So there's only two elements here, but if you know what you're seeing in front of you, you realize there's a bunch to be done, but it's okay. It's okay. This is where you'll spend most of your time in marketing automation, is building out the assets and the content and the gated landing pages and these steps. Number 4, gated content marketing. What we're talking about here is having landing pages, offering content. And we can debate whether you want to have them gated or not. Usually that's best on that webinar. There's reasons to do it, reasons not to do it. Do you want to have chat on your landing page instead of having a forum? All good conversations to have, as long as you have some way of capturing information from that person. And you have some way of offering an asset, offering some valuable content. So this stage is all about figuring out, what do you currently have for content? Have you ever done a content index? Have you ever thought about what you do have? Dug through your archives to really kind of put everything on an Excel spreadsheet? And then have you ever mapped that to the buyer's journey? What kind of early stage content do you have? Mid stage, late stage content? If you miss up the stages and you give an early stage buyer late stage content, there's a mismatch. So it's all about lining things up. Finally, even if you're doing a great job with your landing pages and in your Pardot forms, are you using progressive profiling? Usually not, but I gotta tell you, this is one of the things you definitely wanna use. We literally see clients have their leads increase anywhere from 30%. We have a case study where people were using progressive profiling, their leads just went up 30%. And they didn't actually spend any more in money in marketing. Their forms just got more efficient. They still had the information they needed to capture, and yet they had 30% more people filling these things out, more leads without having to spend any more money in marketing. Fantastic example is because they went to progressive profiling. So this is the stage where we really work with you on doing this and really just doubling down on your forms and figuring out how to make them efficient so you get as many leads as possible. And then number 5, multiple nurture campaigns. Question around this one, when we do the CSI together, is, do you have multiple nurture campaigns? We need to see more than one, so 2 or more, because the idea is you've got more than one buyer. You've got more than one buyer persona. So just one nurture campaign is cool, but for full credit on this, you want to have more than one. And the goal is probably to have several. Yeah, several different ones automating in the back. And some of the best things we can do is, you know those hamster wheels we were in at the beginning, where we were kind of walking around, stuck in that wheel? Well, you take that monthly campaign, and if it worked out really well, you throw in a nurture campaign. So yes, you still have to do the activity because everyone's asking you for it, but then you can start building out your ultimate nurture campaign based on that activity. And after a couple of months, it's cranking. And it's not about how many emails we sent this month, because everyone's at a different stage in the nurture and they're all getting it automatically. And then you can focus on more content, more strategy, other things rather than the day-to-day tactical side. All right, the alignment phase. After doing the foundation, after building out those marketing assets, the nurturing, now it's time to align. Now you could argue, I want to align right away. Totally cool, but you're going to need to have some wins. You're going to need to have some things that you can show sales. Sometimes when we do a training with sales, they get really excited. They want to know what they can use yet. And it's like, well, it's not built yet. So it's good to have a few things built. And also, before we can talk to sales about aligning our jobs, we got to make sure we do our job, which is why the growth phase comes first. But then when we're fully cranking on all of our cylinders, we're doing a good job of marketing, let's make sure we're aligned with sales. So number 6 is sales trained and using Pardot? Now, this doesn't mean they're marketers inside of Pardot. This means, are they using the different features inside of CRMs, right? Sales stays inside of CRM, but are they using the information that Pardot captures? All that engagement activity. Are they able to see that in CRM? Do they know what it means? Are they able to use Engage if you have it? It's all about training in this case. And we have a specific training here at Cheshire. It's about 25 minutes with 5 minutes Q&A, and it's specifically for sales by sales, right? So it's not, and actually usually someone on our sales team teaches it. So it's not, marketing teaching sales how to sell. No. It's one salesperson to another saying, look, I use this, take it or leave it, but I know I close more deals because of it. So in the next 25 minutes, we're going to teach you anything and everything we have here to help you close more deals. That's it. Right? So sales loves that. And it's the first step to really aligning, is when they get to see all the really cool things you're doing in sales and all the cool information that you've been gathering. Like all of your marketing activities are gathering this information for them, so they have more context for when they're doing their sales calls. So they're super appreciative after this call and after these trainings. Now, we can do the training for you. We can do it with you. We just teach you the best practices of what you need to be able to say in those trainings. Any and all the above. Don't care as long as it gets done. That's the most important part. And one of the things in that training is how not to be creepy, right? Because we don't need sales calling someone up saying, hey, I see you're on a pricing page and you've kind of been there for 8 minutes and 15 seconds. Do you have a question about pricing? It's like, whoa, creepy. The alarm's going up. I'm deleting my cookies. I'm closing my browser, throwing my laptop in the bathtub. Don't ever call me again, right? Like, well, we don't need sales doing that. But guess what? If we don't train them, if we don't give them an insight and the best way to handle that, then then who knows what they're going to say. So there's some really cool strategies we have for how they can call and be personable and bring up some information without sounding like they're the CSI or the CIA. Next up, two-dimensional lead rating. We've got some wins with sales, and that's why that one comes first. They're excited, they're getting some information, they're closing some more deals. Now we want to step our alignment up to the next level, and that's using 2D lead rating. That's essentially using Pardot's scoring and grading. How many people are using Pardot scoring? Go ahead and say, yeah, or I am, or smiley face in the chat. Raise your hand. I love that. It's so efficient. Raise your hand too if you want to do that. Say something silly, knock knock joke. Okay, so I see some yeses, I see some nos. Well, guess what? Kind of a trick question. Technically, all of you have scoring and it's automatically set up and it's behind the scenes and it automatically is giving score to people whether you're using it or not. So it's there. But guess what? It's all about making sure you know what it means. And really, it's only part of the picture. So when it comes to scoring, we got to make sure we're using grading too. If you just use scoring, it's like trying to drive and without enough dimension, like one eye closed, it's really hard. So scoring alone can be really dangerous to give to sales, but when you give them grading and scoring together, it's like magic. So this section is all about working with you to figure out what is the best way to do grading. There are some great ways to do it. You want sales to call an A lead and say, yeah, that was an A, thank you, right? And then you want those F leads to never, ever, ever get to sales. Hard to apply a grade when we don't always have their job titles. That's a great point. That's a great point. There's a lot of different things you can do if you don't have their job titles. I love asking the role question because job titles can be so weird. Like my job title, either CMO or Chief Awesome Officer or who knows, founder, it may not fit into an automation. So there's a lot of things we can do though, but we can talk offline too. There's a lot of really cool things you can do, even some automatic ones. Like, do you sell to people in Sri Lanka? If you do, great. If you don't, or if that would make it a lesser of a lead, you can automatically start doing some grading based on location, grading based on some of the choices they made, some of their scoring. So anyways, a lot of stuff we can do, and that's where it happens. It happens here, and then it really pays off for the alignment. Okay, next up is optimization. And I first made this slide because really we get to have fun in the optimization phase. It becomes even a cycle. We get to hang out here. Once we've done all the other work, we get to hang out this optimization side. But you know what? These guys don't look like they're having fun. So really, for me, optimization is more like this. So a couple years back, they added the women's professional soccer into the FIFA soccer game. And they put little white dots in everyone. They mapped everyone. And it's all sci-fi and soccer and exciting, right? So yeah, all these things going on. That's what optimization is like. So way more fun than these lab guys. Optimization is frigging awesome, and we're going to talk about it now. And we get to play in this land if we've done all the work prior to. Had a great question before we get to that. Can we grade people based on their budget? Hell yeah, you can. That's a great one. In fact, BANT is a great acronym to look into. And we talk more about that on the webinar, but it's all about budget, authority, need, and timeline. Those are some great go-to grading formats, even if you don't have anything from sales yet. But that's a great question. Yeah, you can definitely use budget. All right, on with the FIFA soccer. The optimization phase is fantastic. We got into marketing essentially to do this stuff. Okay, like I know there's a lot of asset building, a lot of nurturing can be cool too, but really optimization is like testing goofy ideas and seeing which ones work. That all happens in this phase. But guess what? We got to have some traffic. We got to have some assets. We have to have some control groups already in existence, some things already going on to be able to test against. So number 8 is we get into A/B and multivariate testing. Pardot does this. I don't know if you knew that. And a lot of these things too, you'll find come into play in the mid-tier and higher version of Pardot. But that's fine because you spend all the lower phases working on things that are core to all of Pardot. So by the time you get to, if you've maxed out all the way through 7, and if you're in the lower version of Pardot, it's time to move up. It's time to expand. So in number 8, the A/B testing, multivariate testing is fantastic. My most favorite part is the multivariate testing for landing pages. It's more of like a glorified A/B test or ABCD test, but essentially you can have one URL, and Pardot will test all of the different landing pages. And not only will it see clicks, no, it'll see conversions. That's the most important part. Too many times, and even in the subject line test, it's like, show me who gets the most clicks. Clicks are cool, but not nearly as cool as conversions. So the multivariate testing on Pardot with landing pages is really cool. The challenge though, and some of you may experience this now, you might already be doing testing now. You might be testing subject lines and some other things. I would say it's not a big deal. It's not going to break the bank if you do some subject line testing now, even if maybe you're at CSI number 2 or 3, right? It's okay. Now, I would want you to focus most of your time on the ones that you haven't addressed yet. But it doesn't mean you have to stop testing because it's fun, right? But here's the challenge. What do you test? How many times have we tested the color of the button on the form? Or how many times have we tested one subject line versus another because it sounded different, right? Well, there's actually a hierarchy of optimization. There's a hierarchy of what to test first, second, third, fourth, the actual strategy to testing. So this is where we really get into that. And other things is like a testing plan. It's one thing to test one subject line versus another, but why did it work? And if it did, can you repeat that and do it again? Right? That's where we get serious about testing in this phase. It's a lot of fun. And there's a really cool podcast on this with Brian Massey, fantastic guy. He actually wears a lab coat. So I started wearing a lab coat when we do the webinar for this one too. Really cool stuff. Next is advanced dynamic content. Has anyone used advanced dynamic content or heard of it? Did anyone buy Pardot for this feature? I know I did. It's fantastic. I would say a lot of people are really excited about this feature and nurturing. Usually when you make the move for Pardot, you're like, I want to nurture people and I want to do this advanced dynamic content thing. What is that? That's where you can have whole blocks of an email, or even your whole website can dynamically change based on what you know about someone. So if you know they're in a particular industry, you can change your whole hero image, you can change all your call to actions and everything on your own website automatically using information from Pardot and Salesforce. Is really cool. You can also do this with emails, whereas if you know someone's industry, you know their location, you can change not only the text, but whole blocks of HTML. Really neat. This kind of thing helps you build out one nurture campaign that addresses a particular buyer persona, and then you can also have the content, like the images, can dynamically change in the background. So that way, instead of having to build out 8 drip campaigns, you can build 1. Really neat stuff. So that's where you get to play around in that zone. There's some fantastic stories around it. And then finally, multi-touch reporting. Multi-touch reporting is here because you need to have touches to report on. But once you have done all that work leading up to this, you're in the optimization phase, it's time to start thinking, okay, we know where our leads come from that drive revenue, but what touches have they experienced that have led them to make purchases? There's a lot of big data in here. There's some gray area, but this is the futuristic stuff you get to play in. You get to unleash Einstein from Salesforce and have it look for patterns to try to understand what's happening in your system. So that's what number 10 looks like. And this is super fun. That's the fun phase. We should rename it the fun phase. So, all right, utilizing your results. When we do a CSI together, we'll get that number. So what does it mean? What do I recommend you do? You're going to want to continue your ongoing operations, right? We're not saying, tell the CEO you're not going to do your activity anymore, like hold a big sign and protest. No. Still still work in the business while you're working on the business. And so, like I said, those monthly email campaigns, if you're still doing them, that's awesome. That can become the content that you use in your nurture campaigns. Still keep doing those things, but then also start with your lowest incomplete number on the CSI. And finally, you want to move through the stages in order. Don't jump around. I know stage 10 is fun, right? 8, 9, and 10 are fun. I know, but you really want to focus your effort, because when you do that, what happens is it actually snowballs. You know the whole thing where the snowball starts as like a little thing, and then eventually it's gigantic and it runs over Bugs Bunny, that kind of thing, right? That's what happens with the CSI, and we see it all the time. All the work you put in earlier really pays off later. that buyer persona work, the segmentation work. It's going to help you with all those other steps. So that's why I want to do it in order. But right now you're like, Casey, you're teasing me. I don't know what my score is. I want to do this CSI thing. How can I make that happen? Well, that's a great question. Well, here's the deal. CSIs are free. So you get a CSI, and you get a CSI, and you get a CSI. Everybody gets a CSI. It's almost like a card. They both start with the same letter, and they have 3 letters in there. So everyone gets a CSI, and here's how you get signed up to do one. This is not one of those crazy things. You can literally say in chat, in the Zoom chat, you could say CSI. You could say anything that has the word CSI in it. You could say it in the Q&A box, CSI. You can email me and say, I'd love to do a CSI, find out what my score is. You can text my cell phone that you want to do a CSI, or you can tweet at me. Any and all of the above. Do those things, and we'll make sure that we schedule a time to figure out what your score is. And again, it's free. We're not trying to sell you anything. We want you to know what your number is so you can then improve it and start having fun in the optimization phase. So yeah, okay, cool. Starting to see some in the Q&A section. I haven't seen any texts yet, but feel free. But yeah, so this is what one of the next steps is right? Get that CSI done, and we're going to reach out about that, find out what your score is, and then work the plan. All right. Next step, resources, right? So probably as we went through, you probably hit one. And go ahead and throw it in the chat menu. Which one of the CSIs, maybe you remember the number, or maybe you remember the particular name or the strategy, which one had you intrigued, or you're like, I need to go back and get some more information on that. Go ahead and throw whichever one you were most interested in learning about, or maybe the one you think you should start with. Go ahead and throw that in the chat. Throw that in the question menu. Number 1, yeah, perfect place to start. Absolutely. Okay, I see number 3. Cool. No one's texted me yet, so that's good. We're all good here. I'm just waiting for somebody like, oh, I'm gonna text Casey now. Go for it, right? Number 9, ooh, exciting. Number 4, yeah. So there's all these different numbers. The point is, yeah, find out those ones you want to work on, and then we've got a ton of resources for you all about these, right? It's like this is everything we do here is all about the CSI and the different strategies on that thing. So all the monthly emails you're going to hear about, we have webinars twice a month, and they're on 2 different CSI elements. And you're going to get those emails to let you know every month there's 2 different ones that we're going to talk about where we do a deep dive, whether it's in the ROI one, whether it's in the first one, right? Getting to know your buyer, understanding and segmenting, lead grading and scoring, doing a deep dive into that one. So every month there's webinars on that. We have recordings and those kind of things. So definitely check those out. The other thing is, when we were first building this thing out, we realized, what can we learn about these different topics? And some of these I know really well because we've done a lot of work with companies. But things like gated content marketing, there's a whole industry of content marketing experts, right? So I thought, what can we learn? Well, I went out and found the experts in every single one of these CSI elements who know that particular element the best, right? And I interviewed them on this podcast I have called the Hardcore Marketing Show. And we'll give you information on that next slide, but there's at least 4 interviews with 4 top experts for every CSI topic. In fact, last year, every month had a theme around one of the CSI topics, right? Again, just getting you outside information. And I can't tell you how much I learned from the whole process. There's also worksheets, templates, and even things like, okay, great, go ahead, Cheshire, go ahead and build that thing for me. We have all those kind of materials behind the scenes where if you're like, I want to do a content index, right? And list out all my content and figure out what stage it goes into. Well, guess what? We have a worksheet for that. We have a pre-built Excel template where you can just drop all your content in there and it helps you plan it all out. We've got all these things for you. So just reach out and ask us for this stuff. Finally, ping, if you're working with someone on the team already, go ahead and ping someone, whoever you're working with at Chesh and say, hey, I heard that webinar. I'm really intrigued about lead grading and scoring. Let's talk about it on our next call. And we've got so much information for you. We also do peer groups, and we also have get a bunch of marketers together talking about the different elements of the CSI. So if you're interested in that too, boom, go for it. Great, I already see some more people coming in. No one's texted. But we have a lot of people already saying, like, get me a CSI. Again, all you have to do is just say the word CSI, and you get that. And it's not a cost to it, so it's just more fun than anything. But let's find out what it is. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Finally, we have a book on marketing automation coming out. And one of the things we're doing is if you sign up to do CSI and just find out what your number is, we'll get you on the list. So when the book comes out later this year, we'll get you a copy. Now, we don't have to go on Amazon and buy one. We'll just get you one. Raising your hand is fantastic. Go ahead and throw a comment in the chat if you want to get that CSI in there. Okay. Next, hardcore marketing show. I have learned so much. I've had a chance to interview some amazing people on this show. And it's a podcast. It's on all those different channels. Highly recommend you check it out. If you've never listened to a podcast, here's the chance to start. If you have a long commute, here's another chance to entertain yourself and actually learn a couple things that you can get to work and be kind of like all jazzed up and roll with it and try some new ideas out. iTunes, podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and it's on YouTube too if you want to actually see some of the different speakers and the interactions. I know a lot of people are watching on YouTube as well. That's Brian Massey right there in his lab coat. He was actually drinking coffee out of a beaker as well, so he is authentic as they come. But we've had some great interviews. Adele Revelle, I mentioned her earlier on buyer personas. I know several of you mentioned you wanted to get some work done on stage number 1, or the first element around getting to know your buyer. Adele Revelle actually did a buyer persona interview of me, right? She interviewed me the way she interviews buyers live on the podcast, asking me about how I bought marketing automation. So you would have an example. And I was just blown away because I actually thought a buyer persona, what I always thought it was like a buyer profile. I was confused between the two. And you may be confused too. You're like, what's the difference? Well, there's a strategic difference. Buyer personas are it, buyer profiles, no big deal, right? So there's some great information. Anyways, check this thing out. We are just interviewing marketers left and right, CMOs this year, fantastic people. Garner White, actually Salesforce sales leader, talking about alignment between marketing and sales. Fantastic, right? One of the best guys in sales talking about how to align with marketing. Fantastic. Anyways, I can't say enough. The people on here are amazing. I'm super honored to talk to them. So check that thing out. We've had over 80 episodes, so it's been a blast. Been a blast. Okay, very next steps. Get your CSI score. If you don't already have one, you got to know what number you're at. And again, whether you work with us or not, you at least know where your number is and then work that plan. And one of the best things you can do, even if you don't have an ROI number right now, right? Getting ROI set up is fantastic. You get some real power in the organization when you do that. But even before you do that, if you know your number on CSI, maybe it's a 1 to start with. We've had people that come over from HubSpot and they're a 0 to begin with. Okay, at least you know you're at. So one particular group that I'm thinking of right now, they started as a 2, and they eventually got to a 4, and they essentially doubled their use of marketing automation. They were able to go back internally and say, look what we did. We've actually doubled our use, so that that whatever 1,000 or more they were spending on marketing automation a month, they were actually getting double the use out of it. And then eventually their goal is to get to a 6 by the end of the year, right? So it's those kind of things you can do when you at least know your score. All right, Cheshire Impact, if you don't already know who we are, there's a lot of things on here, but really it's the CSI that we're trying to get out here. Our mission, and if you've heard of Simon Sinek and you want to start with a why, our why is just to make marketers heroes. We've all been marketers at Cheshire Impact, and so I know what it's like to have that crazy CEO or have a good team and you're just trying to get those leads in. So we want to make you a hero and kind of empower you with any information we possibly can. So, and the other thing that people don't necessarily know is that we also do Salesforce too. So we do Pardot, but we also do Salesforce. So if you need help on either of those two, that's where we can really help out. So now we've reached the Q&A portion. So we'll stop our recording and then we will get to your questions. So go ahead and throw your questions anywhere you'd like, whatever's easiest for you. Okay, so